What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today I wanted to have a discussion all about the perks in Call of Duty Vanguard and how I feel they could be significantly improved with just a few little tweaks here or there. It really wouldn't take much. This isn't about taking everything back to the drawing board completely and starting from scratch again. Just a few adjustments and shuffling around of perks that I feel would lead to much better perk balance and perk variety in the game. This is actually something that we saw a couple years back with Modern Warfare 2019. They did shuffle around a bunch of the perks and they made quite a few adjustments, so I feel it's reasonable to expect that maybe some of these changes could be implemented at the very least. And just to be clear about a couple things, first up, I'm not complaining about anything here. I think there's room for improvement, and therefore I want to provide some constructive feedback. Plus, it is just a fun idea sometimes to theorycraft things to see if you could make something better. And another thing I wanted to point out is, yes, there are bigger issues that need to be solved right now, bigger fish to fry. There's a lot of bug fixes that need to be taken care of, but that doesn't mean we can't talk about other things that can improve the game. And it's often the case that the people that are handling the bug fixes, they're not going to be the same people that are handling balancing updates and changes like this. So I still feel it is important to be talking about other aspects of the game and how they could improve. And without further ado, let's just hop into some recommended changes that I think would significantly improve the perk variety and balance. And let's start it off with the most competitive tier of perks in the game currently. This is the tier 1 perks. And going through it, let's start off with Serpentine. I don't really like the addition of this perk in general, just because it creates inconsistencies in gunfights where it's going to take you one extra shot to kill somebody a lot of the times if they're sprinting compared to somebody that's not sprinting, and that's just kind of confusing and jarring. But at the same time, it is in a very competitive tier of perks, so I think that does keep it in check. However, there's one key change I'd like to see with this, and this is a separate hit marker notification letting you know that you are dealing less damage due to this perk. If you are shooting somebody that's sprinting and using this perk, I think you should get a little indicator next to your hit marker just letting you know they have Serpentine, so it might take you that extra bullet to kill. As for Fortified though, I have made a dedicated video on this. The huge change that I'd love to see to the Fortified perk is simply add a damage clamp exactly how we had in Modern Warfare 2019. This would make it so if you have full health and Fortified equipped, whether you're in core modes or hardcore, you will never die to one single explosive unless it's a direct impact on you. So if somebody throws a gammon bomb right next to your foot, you should survive that 100% of the time as long as you had full health before that exploded. Same thing goes with a rocket launcher. If that doesn't direct impact you, then you should be guaranteed to survive that one single explosive. Now, of course, if you're already hurt going into it, or if it's multiple explosives, yeah, you should of course be dying to that. But I think this damage clamp is very, very important, especially for the sake of hardcore game modes at the moment. So that's what I'd like to see done to Fortified. Now let's move on to Survival Training. And with this one, since it is in such a competitive tier here, I think this should also give you fire resistance. That way there is that key difference and key choice between using Fortified and Survival Training, and especially with the recent addition of the Incendiary Grenade on top of Molotovs and Thermites, which are all over the place, I think this would actually make Survival Training a fairly popular choice without necessarily being a crutch. It would just be popular, especially on these smaller maps. Next up, we have the Ninja perk, and this perk I just feel is completely out of place in this tier of perks. And this is for a couple reasons. First up, this is an incredibly powerful tier of perks and a very competitive tier of perks, and the base footstep audio in this game is very low. So outside of Search and Destroy, Ninja is kind of a pointless perk. It's not really going to be doing too much for you, especially when you compare it to something like Ghost, or Fortified, or Survival Training, or Serpentine, or Cold-Blooded. All of these perks are significantly better choices outside of Search and Destroy at least. And as a result, I just think Ninja would be better suited to a tier 3 perk. I think it makes more sense there. I don't think that would suddenly take over that tier of perks completely, but it would actually be a viable choice in relation to those perks. So yeah, straight up, I would just move Ninja over to tier 3. Then let's move into Dauntless, and this perk is often misunderstood, but with this one, the description says you're immune to movement reducing effects, which really this isn't going to be happening all the time. This is very rarely even going to be noticeable when it comes to that. However, the additional benefit you gain from Dauntless that isn't listed here and many people are still unaware of is this is a full counter to the Piercing Vision perk. If you're using Dauntless, you will never show up through walls when somebody's trying to shoot at you with Piercing Vision. And that is a nice element of this perk, but at the same time, if nobody's using Piercing Vision on the other team, then you're practically wasting one of your most valuable perk slots because, like I said, that movement speed penalty is hardly noticeable most of the time anyways. Sure, every now and then you will notice it and it will catch you and you will die to it, but not to the extent that it would justify using a tier 1 perk on that. And I honestly feel like if it were just combined with Cold-Blooded, that would be totally fine, and that wouldn't make Cold-Blooded way too overpowered or anything. I think it would just sort of make sense, and it would also make a lot of sense, especially because it counters piercing vision, which many people expected Cold-Blooded to do anyway. So I think that combo would be totally fine. And speaking of Cold-Blooded, let's just skip over Ghost briefly to talk about Cold-Blooded. One other thing I'd like to see done to the Cold-Blooded perk is I think this should be a full counter to enemy attack dogs. Because as of right now, there is no counter to an enemy attack dog aside from shooting them. And I feel there should be some way to counter that. Now, if they were to do this, I think they should also potentially buff the attack dogs a little bit, make them so they're a little more deadly against people that aren't using Cold-Blooded, but then give people the option to use Cold-Blooded for that full-on counter. And I think that would actually make it a lot more rewarding to get attack dogs as well. You'd get more kills with them if the enemy refuses to switch to Cold-Blooded, but that counterplay is there, so enemies can't really complain all that much about it because they have the ability to switch to Cold-Blooded anytime they want. And that just leaves us with the Ghost perk in Tier 1, and honestly, I think it's perfectly fine as is. I wouldn't touch it at all. Now, when it comes to the Tier 2 of perks, these are all the perks that help with your awareness and your ability to locate enemies or enemy equipment and stuff. Honestly, I don't really have too much to say about this tier of perks. I think they all sort of make sense in relation to each other. I still think Forward Intel is by far the most powerful one for anybody that knows how to read a minimap. But there is one adjustment that I'd really like to see in the Tier 2 of perks, and this is to the Engineer perk. And with this one, I think it needs to be buffed. The first thing is I think enemy equipment and score streaks should be glowing much brighter than they currently do, because in the current state of Engineer, while enemy equipment and streaks will glow a little bit, it is extremely faint and easy to miss. And if you're using one of your perks specifically to see that, I think it should be working a lot more effectively than it currently is. So I think enemy streaks and equipment should glow really bright red when you're using this perk, so you basically can't miss it. And I also feel that aerial streaks like spy planes and counter spy planes, those should be showing up on your minimap, so it makes it a lot faster and easier to locate those if you're specifically trying to shoot them down with your launchers. I think that would make Engineer a lot more worthwhile than it currently is. And with that, now let's move into the Tier 3 of perks. And again, I wouldn't make a ton of adjustments across the board here. I think these perks in general, each one of them has their own benefits, and they'll appeal to different playstyles, and I think they are reasonably balanced with each other, with one massive exception, and this is the Overkill perk. In my opinion, the Overkill perk is just really out of place in Tier 3, and honestly, it would be so much better suited to a Tier 1 perk. It's quite powerful to be using two fully kitted primary weapons in this game, and also, since the Riot Shield exists, and it's great at protecting your back, it's actually better at protecting your back than your front right now, which is kind of funny. I think it's kind of broken that there's not that much competition in Tier 3 for Overkill, and therefore it's not really a big trade-off to get that Riot Shield on your back to constantly be protecting your back. And I've been seeing this a lot in the game as well. There's just turtles running around everywhere where they've got a great primary weapon fully kitted out, oftentimes a shotgun fully kitted out, and then on their back they've got this Riot Shield that covers most of their back and keeps them pretty safe from behind, with, like I said, almost no real trade-off here. So if we were to move Overkill over to the Tier 1 slot, now there is a very real trade-off to selecting that. Some people would still go for that playstyle and they'd still want to be that turtle, but now they wouldn't be able to stay off the minimap by using Ghost, or they wouldn't be able to survive explosives, or in my perfect perk world, fire resistance with the survival training perk. This would be a real trade-off that I feel is much more appropriate for something like Overkill, especially since we have Riot Shields in the game. And with that, that pretty much wraps it up. This right here, I feel, would be a significantly better setup for our perks in Call of Duty Vanguard. And I do feel many, if not all of these changes are very reasonable to be asking for. I'm not asking for them to completely scrap and eliminate perks or entirely change how perks work. I'm just asking for a few little improvements here or there and some shuffling around as well. And if the game were set up like this, I honestly feel we would see so much more perk variety, and also we'd see a lot less gameplay related complaints with things like fire damage, because there's currently no counter to fire damage with the most fire damaging lethals that we've ever seen in a Call of Duty game, or the fact that you can't counter dogs currently, or the fact that in hardcore game modes, gammon bombs are completely overpowered and they have no reasonable counter because there's no damage clamping with fortified. There's so much room for improvement when it comes to the perk design, and I think this right here would be a huge step in the right direction. Now, of course, even my suggestions here aren't necessarily perfect, and this is where I want to hear from you guys in the comment section below. First up, what do you guys think about a lot of the suggestions that I have for the perks in this game? Do you think this would significantly improve perk selection and perk variety? And also, what other reasonable ideas would you have for the perks in this game? Just let me know those thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.